a lot better than that. Misty turned her smirk onto her. Be glad to. Now Starmie, use water gun. From out of the pool came a strong burst of water, which took the rock type and its trainer by surprise and resulted in a direct, effective hit. Graveler, grunting in pain, was pushed back across the ground with its arms held out in front of it defensively. Giselle, on the other hand, kept her cool and smirked as well. Graveler, use bide. Eyes opening, the pre-evolved form of Golem started to focus and a red shroud of energy began to coalesce around it. Seeing the impending danger of such a move, Misty knew it was time to go full on the offensive. Starmie come out of the water and use Swift again. Erupting from the pool, mostly restored from its earlier healing underwater, Starmie spun high into the air and unleashed another barrage of energy stars at its opposing type-natured foe. Standing in place, like a rock, Graveler kept its arms up defensively and grunted as it endured the sizable rain of glowing golden projectiles. Immediately from there, Misty urgently commanded her Pokémon to use another water gun. Now falling from the air, Starmie took aim and fired a large gusher of water at its opponent. This time, when the liquid cannon hit, Graveler displayed signs of discomfort as it squinted its eyes and buckled slightly under the force of the highly effective attack. However, in that moment, the red glow around it started to fade and was replaced by a swirling white orb of energy that began to form around Graveler's center. Alarm filling her, Misty's eyes went a little wide. Hurry Starmie. Use rapid spin and another water gun to finish it. Giselle smirked confidentally, showing no signs of being concerned even as Starmie went spinning toward her Pokémon. Then, just before it could use water gun again, she yelled out. Now Graveler. Unleash your power. All four hands came down and encapsulated the glowing white sphere of energy growing against its midsection. Then, with a loud grunt of graaaav, it unleashed a massive burst of raw power at Starmie. Completely unable to dodge or move away since it was spinning directly toward Graveler, Starmie was soon consumed inside of the eruption of stored-up energy and totally disappeared from view. When the attack swiftly came to an end only a few short seconds after it began, Starmie was seen hurtling back toward the fence again. Only, this time when it hit, the badly damaged water type fell limply to the ground and lay still, its points drooping and gem blinking as a sign of unconsciousness. Starmie. Misty called out to her defeated Pokémon as she ran up to its side and knelt down next to it. The boys next to Giselle all laughed at her defeat while the girl in question merely moved her bangs out of her face and smirked again. See. I tried to tell you, maybe now you've learned your lesson. Misty allowed Starmie to rest back against her while she looked defiantly at the other girl. That doesn't prove anything, we almost won and you know it. The popular, prissy young girl shrugged nonchalantly. I'm afraid almost just doesn't cut it, gym leader Misty. She said the last part in an obviously sarcastic, mocking tone. At this, Ash finally had enough and stepped forward from where he had been standing next to Brock. Alright, I tell you what, if you want to mock people and pretend you're superior to everyone else, why don't you battle me? His eyes narrowed and his tone became hard. I won't stand around and listen to anyone make fun of my friends like that. If you think you really are better than everyone else, you should be able to beat a rookie like me no problem. His challenge was firm and there was an air of finality to it. While he had requested a match with Giselle, the edge in his voice almost seemed to suggest it were a command and he would not be denied. Seeing the change that had come upon the handsome young man, Giselle no longer could be seen smirking. Instead, her expression had morphed into one of stern contemplation. There was an air of intrigue tugging at the corner of her mind about this mysterious boy. While his friend had been loud, emotional and hot-tempered, he was calm, collected and cool. And even though his most recent words had not been impolite or rude, there was a bold, fearless undertone to them. Moreover, his personality had subtly but noticeably shifted. Whereas before Giselle observed him to be a calm, yet not introverted person, now he had suddenly changed. His expression was no longer passive or overly friendly. Now it was set in a firm countenance. There was an intense determination aflame in his amber eyes and a fearless, confident aura exuding from even the way he stood that made Giselle feel as though this was one trainer she needed to take seriously. For reasons she could not explain, something about his current demeanor made her feel slightly uneasy, even a tad off balance. Which, for her, was highly unusual. Still, she tried to hide those feelings by smirking again and putting her hands on her hips. If you really haven't learned anything from watching your friend get beaten, then I suppose I will have to teach you the same lesson. Very well, I accept your challenge. With that said, the battle lines were once more drawn and Giselle and Ash took their positions facing one another. Returning Starmie to its ball, Misty stood and advised her friend. Careful, Ash. I hate to admit it, but she really is good. Brock nodded in agreement. She really knows how to command her Pokémon, even if it's at a disadvantage. Listen to Misty and watch yourself, Ash. Joe furrowed his brow. She's not called the best student at Pokémon Tech for nothing, you know. Without looking back, the messy-haired boy replied in kind. Thanks, but don't worry guys, it's going to be alright. Just trust me. Before the match could start, Giselle returned her Graveler and took out a second Pokeball from the same skirt pocket as before. Then, with a grand and graceful gesture, she let the ball slip from her fingers. Now my cute little friend, time to teach another lesson. The brunette's second Pokémon turned out to be a Cubone, which brandished its club and spun it in hand. Cubone bone bone. Ash, after a time of silent deliberation, made his choice while Pikachu got off his shoulder and stood on the ground next to him. However, before he could make his play, Giselle blinked as if suddenly noticing Pikachu for the first time. With a finger pointed down at the little electric type, she asked. How long have you had that Pikachu there? Ash raised his eyebrow at the question but looked down at his first Pokémon and smiled. A few weeks or so. Pikachu was my first Pokémon when I started my journey. The top tech student gave a small little gasp and palmed her cheek. And you let it run free like that? Oh my, you really are a rookie, aren't you? She then looked up and laughed. Maybe you should just quit now and save yourself the embarrassment. If you can't even keep your Pikachu in its Pokeball. Ash remained calm and simply stared at her. Pikachu doesn't go into his ball because he hates it, and I don't make my Pokémon do things they don't want to do. So why don't you focus more on your own Pokémon and I'll do the same for mine? She merely shrugged, which made the other boys behind her stop laughing. Oh, very well. I just want to save you the humiliation, but if you are insistent on this, then I suppose I have no choice but to show you the hard way. Ash made his own choice in that moment and enlarged the Pokeball he held in his hand. Then, rearing back, he tossed it to the clear blue sky above without an ounce of worry or intimidation. Let's soar on high, girl. Show 'em what you can do. Elegantly, Pidgeotto emerged into the sky, flapping her strong wings as she made several quick, aerial pirouettes before flying gracefully back down and landing softly on the ground, right in front of Ash. If you think a type advantage will help you defeat me, then I am sorry to say you are sadly mistaken. Giselle smirked with one hand on her hip. At this, the young man allowed a small smirk of his own to stretch across his features. Who said I'm going to be using a type advantage? What do you mean? She asked with a sliver of intrigue and curiosity entering her voice, eyes slightly narrowed in thought. I'm going to prove something to you, that's what. He then looked at his evolved flying type and smiled. Hey girl, I want you to stay on the ground for this battle, okay? Pidgeotto, came her soft, respectful coo as she looked back at her trainer and nodded. Giselle, though, seemed surprised. You're going to ground your own flying Pokémon. This will be over quickly indeed. Ash simply crossed his arms. Is that so? Well, come on. She did just that. Fine. Cubone use Bone Club. Pidgeotto use Agility. he replied calmly, not getting overly excited yet. Thanks to all of Pidgeotto's training on both her feet and in the air, she had become markedly fast, both when running and flying. When Cubone came charging in to hit her, she merely leapt to the side with not but a powerful jolt of her legs. Giselle looked stunned seeing this. Huh. Cubone, keep trying to hit it with Bone Club and use focus energy to build up your power. The perpetually in mourning Pokémon began centering its energy, its small body glowing red as it kept trying to hit Pidgeotto with the bone it wielded as a weapon. However, no matter how hard it tried, the surprisingly agile flying type was able to easily strafe, dodge and move away from each strike. Not once taking to the air. Finally, Ash called out, Pidgeotto, bat it away with your wing. The agile flying type leapt to the side again and reached her wing out just as Cubone swung its club down to where she had been standing mere seconds before. With that one simple but surprisingly forceful motion, her wing smacked Cubone and sent it flying away from her, where it hit the ground hard and grunted. Eyes widening at the entirely unexpected maneuver from the flying type with colorful plumage, Giselle called out to her Pokémon. Are you okay, Cubone? Cubone bone. It affirmed as it got back onto its feet again and brandished its club. She smiled. Good. Now use mud slap. Cubone reared its head back and then spat a large glob of mud from underneath of the skull helmet it wore. Then, using its bone club, the dino-resemblant Pokémon struck the muddy blob and turned it into a thick spray which flew straight at Pidgeotto. Without needing a command, however, she was able to easily jump away and avoid the dirty, liquidy projectile. Though this proved to be only a ruse since Giselle was quick to act. Now use Bonemerang. Cubone tossed its club in a fast spinning arc, which neared the agile bird in only seconds. Ash swiftly countered however by yelling, jump and knock it away with your wings. Narrowing her sharp, keen eyes, Pidgeotto leapt up just as the fastly spinning club converged upon her. Then, with her wings folded inward, she suddenly unfurled them with a powerful thrust and smacked the bone away from her. It went flying into the air but Cubone was quick to jump as well and grab it, making an accurate and easy catch before the bony weapon could hit the ground. No sooner did Giselle's Pokémon touch back down on the concrete though before she was smoothly executing another command. Use a focus energy and thrash combo Cubone. Those words had scarcely left her lips before the ground type twirled its club in hand and started to glow red once more. It didn't take long to do so this time, however, since the former use of focus energy had already increased Cubone's attack force to some degree. Therefore, with a few impressive and fluid twirls and spins of its club, Giselle's diminutive but tough little Pokémon took off running at Pidgeotto. There was a fire in its eyes that could be seen in the impending manic frenzy of attacks that followed only further demonstrated Cubone's intensity. Unleashing a wild, uncontrollable assault of rapid jabs, strikes, thrusts and whacks with its club that signified the use of thrash, Cubone unleashed a frenetic barrage on its opponent. Each hit coming faster than the next. Even for all of its speed and ferocity though, Pidgeotto remained calm and unfazed. Her body moved with a grace and smoothness that would seem otherwise unbefitting to a bird like her, who refused to use her wings to take to the air. As the well-trained flying type continued to dodge each of Cubone's focus-empowered attacks, the boys behind Giselle watched with admittedly impressed expressions on their faces. Not one of them scarcely able to believe that a purely flying type Pokémon would be able to move and maneuver so skillfully on the ground as in the air. Each of them gave voice to this in murmuring, hushed tones and even Giselle seemed impressed at what she was seeing. Though she didn't speak on it, only urging her Pokémon on to press the attack without ceasing. After several more strikes and thrusts with its club, Cubone leapt back and then jumped forward, brandishing the bony weapon overhead for a swift downward strike. At that moment though, Ash finally gave instruction to his Pokémon. Tuck your wings in again and then thrust them out Pidgeotto. Just before her enemy could fall upon her and clobber her with its bone club, The female bird Pokémon curled her wings in over her body, like before, and held them taut against herself. When Cubone finally made contact and struck her with its club, the blunt instrument barely made contact with her feathers before she unfurled them with a powerful thrust and sent her opponent flying. Only this time, the bone Cubone had been wielding was knocked from its hand and also went soaring. Flailing wildly, not made for air travel, Giselle's Pokémon flew high into the air and then began to descend once more at the same rapid rate of speed. Then, just before Cubone was set to hit the ground, Ash commanded in a firm tone. Use agility and then a grounded aerial ace. With a surprising burst of speed, Pidgeotto took off like a lightning bolt shot straight from the heavens, her feathery form glowing silvery white as she used agility. Then, just as she neared the falling form of Cubone, she quickly unfurled her wings and gave one powerful downward thrust with them, which sent her zipping toward her descending opponent like a perfectly aligned arrow. Amazingly, she still was not flying. The extra burst of speed and power from her wings merely gave her the boost she needed to leave the ground a few scant inches. Which essentially made it seem as though she had taken a low, crouching leap. At this impressive clip of speed she was traveling at, Cubone had no chance to hope for an opportunity to avoid what was coming. Therefore, just before it hit the ground, Pidgeotto made contact first and smashed herself into her opponent with expertly precise timing. The force of the grounded aerial attack sent Cubone careening across the short distance between it and the wall behind Giselle. In milliseconds, the brunette felt, more than saw, a blur of brown and white zooming by her just before a smacking sound and the loud rattling of a fence reverberated throughout the pool. Looking back, she saw her Pokémon now laying on the ground after having struck the chain link fence so hard that it rebounded off of it and flew straight into the ground. Face first. Ah! Cubone. She ran over to it and knelt down, gently turning Cubone face up to see that swirls of heavy unconsciousness were now shading its eyes. The other students were shocked at what they saw, even Joe. Giselle too was taken aback at what had just occurred, her wide eyes telling the tale words could not. I can't believe it. Joe spoke at last. He actually beat her Cubone. And his Pidgeotto never even flew. Amazing. Good job, girl. Ash praised Pidgeotto as she returned to his side, him kneeling down and fondly stroking her feathers for a job well done. He then looked up from smiling at his Pokémon, who was cooing at his affection, and became serious again upon settling his gaze on Giselle. This battle isn't over yet. You still have one Pokémon left, right? To her credit, the young woman was able to mostly hide her disbelief at losing a battle with her Cubone, who she returned to its ball before standing up and turning to face the boy again. Although this time, she didn't smirk or make any arrogant, snide comments. Instead, she stepped forward and pulled out the Pokeball holding her Graveler. We are going to win, you have no chance of victory. She stated adamantly just before releasing her rock-solid second Pokémon from its ball again. Ash stood up and nodded down at Pidgeotto. Good job, girl, take a nice rest. With that, he returned her to her ball while Joe shook his head at the sight of Giselle's strongest Pokémon once more taken the field for battle. I can't believe Ash's Pidgeotto beat Cubone and has actually resorted Giselle to using her Graveler as her last Pokémon. Brock crossed his arms. That's Ash for you. He always ends up surprising you and doing something entirely unexpected. Misty raised her fist and shook it with a fire alight in her eyes. Come on, Ash. Beat that little prissy little witch. Ash looked down at Pikachu and smiled. You wanna take this one, buddy? Pika. He replied energetically as the small electric type bounded forward and took a battle stance. Seeing this, Giselle blinked and then frowned at her opponent. I don't know if you are trying to mock me or are just feeling cocky because you defeated my Cubone. But either way, just because you won that last battle does not mean you are winning this match, and I will show you not to underestimate us. I am the top student at Pokémon Tech. The messy-haired boy put a hand in his pocket and shrugged. I'm not mocking anybody, let's just start the battle already. Now as serious as could be, Giselle narrowed her eyes and held her hand out. Gladly. Graveler use rollout. Grav. Came the gravelly, grunting reply of the rock type as it tucked into a tight ball while jumping into the air. Then, as soon as it hit the ground, it immediately started to roll toward Pikachu at high speeds. Both he and his trainer remained calm though, Pikachu not moving a muscle until Graveler was right on top of him. At which time he finally moved and did so with the fleetness of foot that was already proving him to be an exceptionally fast Pokémon. Having leapt to the side to avoid getting rolled over, Pikachu smirked and then jumped to the other side once Graveler turned and came back toward him again. With a powerful spring of his strong legs, the small mouse vaulted up onto the spinning rock type and ran in place atop of it like a professional log roller. While Graveler rolled this way and that around the pool area, attempting to shake its uninvited passenger, Pikachu maintained perfect balance and kept his paws moving in time with the rapid movement of the rolling rock. Graveler, shake that little mouse off. Giselle ordered commandingly. Do whatever it takes, get it off. Don't let it make an amateur of you like that. Graveler turned mid-roll and headed toward the pool house where the aquatic equipment was kept. However, just before it could smash into the side of the building and flatten Pikachu, the spunky electric type leapt off of his rocky perch and directly at the wall in question. No sooner did his paws land on the solid, concrete surface and Pikachu was immediately leaping back off the wall and high into the air. Graveler came out of its roll after hitting the wall, but the airborne electric type was already falling back down toward it at accelerated speeds. His eyes were narrowed in a concentrated glare and his paws, feet and tail had been tucked in for extra streamlined speed. Pikachu, use Iron Tail. Ash commanded without a hitch. What? No way. The green-haired boy that had been interrogating Joe gaped in disbelief just as Pikachu started to spin and his tail began to glow brightly. There's no way that Pikachu knows an advanced move like Iron Tail if it's really only been with that kid for a short while. Another boy, the messy red-haired one, added in an equally shocked tone. They proved to be quite wrong indeed, since Pikachu finally made contact with Graveler and did so by smashing his glowing, steely hard tail right on top of the rock type's head. Instead of jumping off though, regardless of the fact that Graveler was already reeling back from the super effective attack, Pikachu's cheeks started to spark just as his trainer called out again. Use your metal tail like a lightning rod and give it a focused lightning thunderbolt. With a loud vocalization of PIKAAA. The high-voltage mouse sent a charge of condensed, extra-powerful electricity straight into Graveler's body via the metallic tail still laying atop its head. To the utter bafflement of Giselle and the other boys watching, Graveler's entire body went rigid and its eyes bugged out as the bolt of lightning had far greater, much more damaging effect than such an attack would normally have on a Pokémon of its type. So great was the power and effectiveness of Pikachu's Thunderbolt, increased as it was by his metallic tail directly touching Graveler and condensing the atomic density of the electricity itself, that the evolved form of Geodude went stumbling backward on drunken, unsteady feet. Now charred in scorch marks from the electrical burns, Graveler wobbled around several times before finally collapsing right at Giselle's feet. Completely unconscious. There was a period of total silence as the reality of what had just happened sunk in. While Pikachu had been standing ready to go again if need be, the sight of Graveler laying unconscious proved that it was not needed. Giselle, shaken to her core that she had just been defeated, ran up to her fallen Pokémon and knelt next to it. Graveler. She slowly helped it up into a sitting position as the rock type gradually regained consciousness. Concern and compassion was reflected in her eyes for its well-being. Are you okay? Eventually, Graveler regained enough of its lucidity to nod in reply, though there was an obvious aura of dejected sadness at its loss. Grav. No, it wasn't your fault. The brunette smiled tearily at her Pokémon. You battled wonderfully, Graveler, you and Cubone. It was my fault we lost. As she sat in total silence with her beaten and battered partner for a time, the boys behind Giselle were still in dumbfounded disbelief that the best student at their school had just been defeated, soundly at that, right before their very eyes. By a relative nobody, rookie trainer that had just shown up out of nowhere. Each of the bullies looked across the short distance separating them from Ash, whom was now holding Pikachu and laughing and celebrating their victory, totally different than how he had just been during the match. Formerly so serious and intense but now lighthearted and joyfully spinning his first Pokémon like a happy child. A sense of respect but also fear settled upon the small group of boys for the young trainer from Pallet in that very moment. Which meant not a one of them attempted to say anything or be careless with their words in the current moment. Giselle was, by far, superior to all of them in Pokémon training and battling, and if such a one as Ash had been able to so handily defeat her, they knew that they themselves stood no chance. While Brock and Misty did not seem overly surprised at their friend's victory, albeit the latter was indeed cheering his triumph quite loudly out of spite for the brunette, Joe seemed totally awestruck. "I can't believe it," he yelled with his hands going up to grasp at his head. He actually beat Giselle. They defeated both of her Pokémon and beat her. Wow. That was the most amazing thing I've ever seen. No one here at school has ever battled like that before. Having finished their small victory jubilee, Ash allowed Pikachu to return to his shoulder while walking up to Giselle. "Hey," he began, his tone soft and imploring. She slowly looked up at him, her eyes watery, and seeing this, he felt his heart soften. No matter how demeaning or rude she may have been, Ash could not stand the sight of a saddened or crying girl. "Listen." He sighed and shook his head. "I don't want you to be all upset and broken up over this. Yeah, you lost, but big deal, right? You can take this experience and learn from it." At this, he looked at her and the other boys who were still standing back behind Giselle. "I know you guys feel like you have a leg up just because you go to this prestigious school, but that doesn't make you better than anyone else. And holding your knowledge over other people's heads just to make yourselves feel superior is not only wrong, it's childish and immature." He gestured at himself. "I've only been traveling with my Pokémon for a short period of time now. I'm still a rookie. But we were able to beat who you call the top student at your school. And do you know why?" At this, Giselle and even the group of boys behind her seemed to be listening attentively to his words. "It's because I don't assume I'm better than someone else just because of some predetermined factor. I take all my opponents seriously and realize that anyone can surprise you in a battle. It's just the way of it." He shrugged. "Professor Oak taught me that underestimating your opponent just because you have more book knowledge is dangerous. Hard-earned experience, skill, passion, strong bonds with your Pokémon, and learning lessons that only life on the road, seeing the world firsthand, can teach you, those things make someone a great trainer. Especially better than a person who never hardly leaves the classroom." At these words, all of their eyes widened. "No way." One of the boys began. "You know Professor Oak?" Another continued, followed by still another repeating. "The Professor Oak." He nodded simply. "Yeah, he's a friend of my family, like my grandfather actually. He was also my mentor before I started out on my journey." Amazement but also understanding seemed to flood the minds of all the young Pokémon Tech students. As one, murmuring broke out among them, with the chief words spoken being, "Man, no wonder he beat Giselle. Yeah, especially if Professor Oak taught him. He's a lot better than we thought. I wonder if he'd be willing to teach us a few things that the professor taught him." Giselle looked down at the ground for a few moments and then sighed as she slowly shook her head. I am sorry for behaving the way I did." She gently rubbed her graveler's rocky body. "I guess I have just been used to being the best here at school for so long that I let it go to my head. It made me arrogant. When you start thinking you're the best, that's when you run into serious trouble of having a rude wake-up call." Brock said wisely as he walked over to them with Misty and Joe in tow. And it makes you a serious snob toward other people too, Misty added with crossed arms and a slight glare. She was not going to let the brunette off for her poor behavior so easily. Giselle stood up and nodded, her major upset loss to Ash having been utterly swept, really causing her to suddenly rethink many of her former concepts and decisions. As well as her attitude in general toward Pokémon training. Even her demeanor seemed to have abruptly shifted to a certain degree. The haughty, sneering aura she had perpetually given off before was now replaced by a more subdued, less confrontational presence. Some might think such a drastic change to be laughable at best, too sudden. But Giselle was an exceedingly intelligent young woman with an eye firmly focused on success. While she might have allowed her sense of overinflated grandeur as the top tech student to cloud her mind, she had come so far in the first place because of her proclivity to learn. And learn quickly. For her, being shown in such a dramatic way how utterly outmatched she was by people outside of school caused Giselle to immediately stop, reflect and process her own shortcomings. Where did she go wrong? What was she lacking that led to such an overwhelming defeat? And at the hands of a rookie of all things. Part of her intelligence and high IQ was that she didn't spend time sulking and feeling sorry for herself. Her philosophy was that she preferred to learn from her shortcomings and failures rather than waste time wallowing in pity. And so, that is exactly what she did, looking at Ash and nodding. I can tell that the skill you have gained just from your short time being on the road with your Pokémon is something I could not be prepared for. She hung her head and closed her eyes. I thought I was unbeatable because I always got the highest grades and did the best in school. But, maybe this is a lesson we all need to learn from today. That school doesn't teach you everything. Just as she looked up again and prepared to say something else, Pikachu's ears suddenly perked up just before he leapt off of Ash's shoulder and released a surprising bolt of thunder from his small body. Pikachu! Came his signature cry, just as the electric bolt emitted from his cheeks impacted against a thick ball of sludge that had suddenly come flying in from somewhere on the other side of the pool. Both attacks connected and cancelled each other out with a small explosion that kicked up a faint screen of hazy dust. Ash and all the other kids, caught completely unawares though, were forced to cover their mouths and noses to shield them from the inhalation of all the dust and smoke. Coughing was soon nonetheless heard from some of the academy boys as they accidentally inhaled the particulate matter anyway. However, all of the young trainers, as a whole, jumped into full-on alert and turned in the direction that the surprise, sludgy attack had come from. Well, we could have told you that about school and you wouldn't have had to have wasted a credit of your parents' money. The voice who spoke was undeniably sassy and female. Reason being was soon revealed since, standing on the other side of the pool, having apparently traversed over the fence in all the excitement of the battle, was Jessie, James and Meowth. Of course, this school produces nothing but losers and wimps anyway, so we shouldn't be surprised at their stupidity, should we, Jessie? Was James's equally snarky reply. Floating beside him was his coughing, who was the source of the sludge ball that had been fired seconds before. Team Rocket. All three traveling trainers spoke in unison. What are you guys doing here? Trying to steal my Pikachu again? Ash demanded. Hey, yuz ain't as bright as all your smarty pants words might suggest. Meowth mocked as he crossed his paws across his chest. We's bad guys, of course we're here to steal Pokémon. He then pointed one of his clawed fingers and smirked. And it ain't just gonna be your Pikachu that's gonna get pilfered but all da Pokémon here at this school. A gasp of shock and concerned murmuring broke out from the group of boys behind Giselle while the brunette herself looked at Ash. Do you know those three? The dark-haired rookie nodded. Yeah, unfortunately. Wish I could say I didn't. It was Misty, though, who explained the matter. They're a bunch of crooks who say they're from Team Rocket. They steal other people's Pokémon and anything else they can get their nasty hands on. Giselle's eyes widened hearing that. Team Rocket. You mean that mysterious criminal organization that operates like a shadow crime syndicate here in Kanto? The rocket trio in question seemed to puff up at that declaration until Misty replied in a disgusted tone. That's what they say, but I think they're just a couple of losers who like playing dress up. The eyes of the three criminals in question opened wide at that before an angrily indignant reply burst forth from them at the same time. "Who are you calling losers? Listen here, you shapeless little twig." Jessie pointed with a scowl on her otherwise attractive features. "We might be criminals, but we most certainly are not losers." James nodded vigorously with his fists held up in the air. "Yeah, that's right. You tell them, Jessie. At least we weren't foolish enough to stay in a two-bit, crooked, poor excuse for a school like this. Wasting all our money away on an education that isn't worth the paper its diplomas are printed on." The magenta-haired beauty nodded in a self-satisfied fashion, upturning her nose and smirking. "Well said indeed, James. We aren't the losers here, you are." She turned back to the tech students in question and stuck her tongue out while pulling her right eyelid down insultingly. Blah. Giselle's keen mind immediately registered the names of the three bumbling fools, as well as James's comment about wasting money on Pokémon tech tuition. Therefore, she blinked once, then twice before raising her finger. "Wait a minute. Jessie. James." A gasp suddenly escaped her lips as she cupped her hands over her mouth, eyes wide in surprise. "No. You couldn't possibly be." The shock and disbelief on her face didn't last long though and was soon replaced by unabashed surety as she removed her hands from her mouth and pointed. "Oh my. It is. It really is. I know you two, your names are infamous here at Pokémon Tech." "They are." Ash and his friends spoke together in shock, unable to even fathom that the idiotic duo in question could have ever attended an academic institution as prestigious as Pokémon Tech. Giselle's expression soon morphed into utter hilarity as she smirked. "Of course. These two used to go to this school years ago and mysteriously ended up dropping out after receiving the lowest midterm test scores in Pokémon Tech history." Both she and the group of male students behind her all started to laugh uproariously while Jessie and James's faces turned bright red from a mixture of anger and humiliation. "Quit laughing, you little trolls." The hot-tempered redhead fumed. "Yeah, it wasn't our fault we failed. Those tests were rigged," James accused as he waved his arms around furiously. Joe blinked. "Wow, that's sad. Even I was able to pass the midterms and I didn't hardly even need to study. It's the end-term exams that are hard." Jessie and James appeared to be ready to burst at any moment, especially the former, whom snorted hot steam from her nose and growled. "Oh, we'll show you who the idiots are and see who's laughing in the end. Yeah, we'll give you a lesson that 2 + 2 equals pain when you insult Team Rocket," James declared passionately, just as Jessie pulled out a Pokeball and released her Ekans to join alongside his coughing. Ash deadpanned as the villainous duo prepared for battle. "Seriously, don't you think it's sad you're trying to rob a school? I mean, of all the potential targets out there. Quite twerp." Jessie snapped. "We'll deal with you and your Pikachu after we teach these snotty rich brats a lesson." Without stopping to consider what it was they were about to do, both of them were already commanding their respective Pokémon to charge across the pool and attack Giselle and the others. Unfortunately for them, Meowth was the only one on the team who had any rational sense of thinking. Due to this, he was also the only one who saw the impending danger of coughing and Ekans needing to traverse across the length of the pool to reach the other side. Especially since, unlike the former who could hover above the water, the latter had to dive into the pool and start slithering through the cool H20 in order to do so. "Pikachu, just use Thunderbolt and let's call it a day, okay?" A thin-eyed Ash advised. To wit, an equally exasperated Pikachu simply walked up to the water's edge on both hind feet and stopped. Meowth saw the sparking of the electric type's cheeks and he therefore quickly turned to his foul-up prone partners, eyes wide as he began waving his paws around. "Wait. Use twos. Don't. Water conducts." But it was too late. With a bored-sounding, chew, Pikachu released a bolt of lightning that was just powerful to do the job. And that job was to strike the water. As soon as this happened, the entire pool was lit up in a bright, yellowish golden glow as the electrical current immediately spread in an arc across the length and width of the small body of water. Since Ekans was in the pool, it was the first to suffer the effects of the natural byproduct of combining water and electricity. And since coughing was hovering only a few short inches above the surface of the water, it too was hit by the large arcs of electrical energy shooting up off the pool. At the apex of the electrical, aquatic surge, Ekans and coughing were both sent flying back across the pool. It was here that they crashed down at the feet of their trainers with electric burn marks covering their bodies and unconscious swirls in their eyes. No! Jessie roared furiously, stomping her foot and shaking her fists. Get up, Ekans. Get up. Don't embarrass me like this. You too, coughing. James urged. I won't be seen as a loser in the eyes of those snot-nosed little punks and prove them right that I should have stayed in school. The pleas of their trainers fell on deaf ears, however, as neither of the soundly defeated Pokémon so much as moved neither scale nor crater. All they gave in reply was pained grunts and hisses. Let that be a lesson to you about being pathetic loser dropouts. Giselle taunted, her hands on her hips as a little fire returned to her voice. Maybe if you had stayed in school you would have remembered that making any Pokémon go up against an electric type in a body of water is just asking for trouble. But it serves you right, filthy crooks. Hey, we're not filthy. James retorted with a fist shake. I bathe at least every other day. Ash shook his head and sighed. I'm tired of this already. Pikachu, would you please? The electric mouse looked back at his trainer and gave a simple thumbs up before returning his attention to the rotten rockets across the pool. Then, with a plainly joyous smirk on his cute little face, which would seem unnerving to anyone whom such a look was directed at, he charged up his electricity once more. This time for a much stronger attack. Guys. Meowth stepped back nervously as Pikachu prepared to unleash thunderous hell. I don't think we tote his plan trough real well. We shoulda done sometin' else besides showin' up and just trash talkin'. His two human companions stopped fuming at the mocking fun being made at their expense and simply looked at one another. In unison, they blinked and Jessie held her finger up. You know. I suppose that actually would have been the best idea. James put a hand to his chin. Well, we did just get our pants beaten off pretty easily, and in one small attack no less. That's pretty embarrassing, whether you're a dropout like we are or not, I must agree. As if finally realizing their plight, the two foolish clowns embraced one another out of sheer, comical fear and looked across the pool just as Ash smirked and held out his hand. Here, we'll teach you three a lesson you won't forget, and it's totally free. Pikachu used Thunderbolt. Just as the small but powerful mouse unleashed the bolt of raw, overwhelming electrical power he had been charging up, the light of terror was bright in Jessie, James and Meowth's eyes, followed by a matching scream from the trio that was cut short as soon as the thunderous hammer struck. The entire pool was lit up by the brightness of Pikachu's fierce electric attack, and the rocket trio who became victims of it would most definitely attest to the effect since their entire bodies jolted, jerked and shook. As the thunderbolt of sheer power ravaged them, causing their eyes to bulge, limbs to go stiff and hair to stand on end, even Ekans and coughing were caught back up in yet another round of electrical torture. When the rampant charge of focused thunder finally exploded like a timed detonator reaching its mark, the plume of smoke it sent up ascended high into the air. But that wasn't all that was sent skyward. Like rockets in their own right, Jessie, James, Meowth and the Pokémon belonging to the former two were sent shooting toward the heavens. Singed and covered in ashen burn marks, the three wannabe crooks looked supremely dejected. This isn't fair. Jessie whined, fists balled up to her chest and legs pressed together. This was supposed to be our moment to show that we don't need the system. And we didn't even get to give our motto this time. Who cares about a motto? The system just gave us a major spanking and stamped F's on our report card again. James morosely sighed with his head dropped low. Yeah well used twos woulda got sat in da corner wearin' da dunce cap at any school yas went to. Meowth crossly replied with his furry, soot-marred paws held tight to his chest. Just as they disappeared into the wide blue yonder of the daytime sky, a trio chorus of, "We," re-blasting off AGAAAAAIN. Filtered back down to the earth. Maybe you three should go back to school. Brock called after them in amusement, which caused Ash, Misty, Joe, Giselle and the other tech students to laugh. Wow Ash, you and your Pokémon are totally awesome. Joe complimented after the excitement was over and he turned to the dark-haired trainer from Palette. I've never seen anyone here at school battle like you guys before, it was amazing to watch. Yeah totally. You really are a great trainer. I can't believe you're a rookie. All of these statements and more were shared in kind by the other students who had formerly harassed Ash and his friends, as well as Joe. Yet, after seeing the former's skill, it had them singing quite the different tune. Ash, ever one for modesty, turned to them all and rubbed the back of his neck while smiling awkwardly. Hey, no, it's no big deal, seriously. My Pokémon are the ones who really deserve to be praised. Finally, Giselle stepped offered a genuine smile. Not an arrogant, haughty or demeaning smirk but a true smile. While your Pikachu and Pidgeotto were indeed impressive, you also demonstrated your own skill and prowess as a Pokémon trainer. She then took hold of her right arm with her left hand and looked down as a genuinely apologetic expression came upon her features. Ash, I am truly sorry that I mocked you earlier and behaved so rudely. She looked at Misty even. And to you as well Misty. While her apology surprised Ash and further shocked Misty, it utterly stunned Joe as she turned to him and gave a slight bow of her head. And Joe, I apologize to you most of all. What? The boy stammered, his eyes wide as she continued. I am sorry that I have behaved in such a condescending and demeaning fashion ever since you started school here. The brunette looked up again and smiled sadly. I let the fact that I had perfect grades and was the best student in every class cause me to become mean and belittling. Even though I didn't realize it before now. She looked back at the other tech students, who were currently staring at her in states of surprise of their own. Listen all of you. Just because you may be good at a particular subject or do not have to struggle the way others do does not give you a reason to behave like a bully to other people. She gestured at herself. All this time I could have been helping my fellow classmates but all I did instead was make them feel poorly about themselves. My arrogance and pride blinded me. But, at this, she gestured at Ash. This rookie trainer from nowhere showed up and defeated me with little to no effort. I was humbled and humiliated in front of the very people I have always looked down on and made fun of. Ash taught me a lesson in our battle, and even against those crooks just now. And if there is one thing that I am, it is a fast learner. She looked up at the sky then, her dark eyes reflecting a serious gleam within. School is wonderful in its own right, but there are some things that you simply cannot learn from books. There are some lessons that only life and experiencing the world itself, firsthand, can teach you. And no one is inherently better than another just because of one single factor. Anyone can become great if they work hard enough toward it. She looked back at her classmates then. I vow that from now on, I will never again look down on someone else or make fun of them just because I may know more or have more experience. I will help those less experienced than myself and give everyone a fair assessment, regardless of who they are or where they come from. As long as they prove themselves to earn my trust and not take advantage of my willingness to help. Giselle turned her focus onto Joe and clasped her hands down in front of her. I do not expect it after the way I have acted, but, is there any way you can forgive me, Joe? While the brown-haired boy was shocked at her apology, he was even more taken aback when the other boys, following her lead, shared a look with one another and then adopted expressions of repentance as well. Yeah, Joe, I'm real sorry about what we did to you before and how we've always teased you. I hope you can forgive me. The one with green hair was visibly struggling to make up an adequate apology, but he did his best nonetheless. Same here, man, I'm sorry too. The boy with somewhat unkempt red hair spoke in agreement with his friend. The others all joined suit in their own ways of making amends and, while initially only able to stare in disbelief, eventually Joe managed to reply. Yeah, sure, I accept your apologies. At last, he managed a smile of his own. Thanks you guys, all of you, it really means a lot to me. Ash and his friends looked at each other and shared their own smiles of satisfaction, happy that their little detour to help someone had ended in success. Ash. Giselle turned her focus back onto the raven-haired rookie. I just wanted to say. She trailed off for a moment and he was left to just blink at her before finally saying something himself. Yeah. It took a few moments, but, after a bit longer, she actually smiled at him. A warm, kind smile that complimented her already beautiful features. I wanted to say thank you. For the match, for fighting off those thieves and, well. Her cheeks turned a light shade of red. For everything really. She held her hand up. I'm sure if our lives were a story and someone was reading it, then they might think this sudden change of heart on my behalf is a little unrealistic, but, battling you, and losing the way I did, it really changed the way I saw things. Giselle smiled at Pikachu, who was now resting on his trainer's shoulder again, and reached out to very lightly pet his cheek. This rather quickly resulted in a happy smile coming across his face as he leaned into her hand and allowed her to continue her ministrations. I always thought I was better than everyone else here, but after losing to you the way I did, well, it would change the way most anyone would perceive things. Especially themselves. And seeing how nasty and miserable those Team Rocket criminals were, who used to be students here no less, also really made me reflect on myself. Ash smiled hearing her words and put his hands in his pockets. I'm just happy it helped you do a little inner reflection and you came out with something positive through it all. That's why we came with Joe anyway, to talk to you guys and try to change your way of thinking toward other people. He tilted his head. You're really good, Giselle, you have a lot of skill. I bet if you actually went out and got some experience, then you'd become way better. And it's like Professor Oak always told me, if you temper your arrogance with a little humility, there's no telling what you can accomplish. She smiled at his compliment and her cheeks turned a little red again. Though, before any more could be said, the loud noise of a stomach growling suddenly broke the silence. It was Ash who rubbed the back of his neck and smiled guiltily. Hey, man, I think it's getting close to time to eat again, I'm starved. Misty sighed and rolled her eyes. You and your stomach, Ash. I swear it's like you have a bottomless pit. Brock chuckled and intervened. Well, I suppose I can whip us up something before we head out again. Well, why don't you all come to the dining hall with us? Giselle offered. We don't have classes today or tomorrow since it's the weekend, so I'm free, and guests are allowed in with a student. Sure, that sounds great. Ash eagerly accepted before looking at his friends. What do you say, guys?